A packed bar at 5 p.m. feels great. That doesn't always mean that you're being profitable. And when we think about happy hours in general, those discounts are supposed to bring in guests that wouldn't otherwise come in. So if your happy hour is just pulling guests that would be there anyway, you might be giving away your margin for nothing. Now, that doesn't mean don't do happy hours, but it means you need to look at the right math. And welcome to the Bar Business Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. And if you're tired of figuring out every bar problem alone, well, join Bar Business Nation, our free Facebook group for bar owners who want better ideas and real conversations. The link's in the show notes. Today on the Bar Business Podcast, we're going to be talking about how to make your happy hours more effective. What should happy hour actually do? How you can audit whether or not it's doing what you need it to do. The math you need to know in order to conduct that audit, and how to react based upon what you find. Now, most bars have always just had a happy hour. Why? Mostly because the guy down the street has a happy hour too. And that's honestly one of the best reasons to have a happy hour. But we need to look at, are those happy hours gaining us more profit or are we losing profit? Because quite frankly, yeah, a packed bar feels great. And maybe 100 people in your bar is fantastic at 5 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I mean, it just is. But if you have 100 people and you're making nothing, you're better off having 20 people and making something, right? Top line revenue and bottom line profit are not always aligned, especially when we're in heavy discount periods. So we need a way to figure that out. And I think the bottom line here is, and this is true of happy hour, this is true of any special, any event, any live music, anything you're doing. It only works if it's driving incremental profits, not just revenue. It needs to generate guests and orders that would not have happened without that promotion. And if it's not doing that, it's not serving the purpose it's meant to serve within your business. So first of all, what are happy hours actually supposed to do? Well, if we go back to the very beginning of it, it was to fill a slow day part by attracting guests who wouldn't otherwise visit, or people that wouldn't come in if you were charging full price. And that's the assumption baked into happy hour, right? The discounted revenue from incremental increasing guests is better than zero revenue from an empty bar, or it's better than a little bit of revenue from a few people being in the bar. And that assumption really only holds if we're getting additional incremental profit. Now, we might be getting guests that we wouldn't otherwise get, but if those guests are not generating revenue that's going to our bottom line, it may or may not be helping us. And if your happy hour crowd is just your regular crowd coming in at their regular time, you might not be creating revenue. You might be discounting existing revenue. Now, that doesn't mean that just pull the happy hour out, pull those specials out, because maybe you'll lose some folks and then you're not ahead. But we need some math here to really figure this out, right? Because if we say, well, you have 100 guests, but you're discounting a bunch, so your profit during happy hour is, let's say, 2 or 3%, versus having fewer guests and your profit is 5, 10, 15%, right? It's all about volume versus the profit percentage going to the bottom line. And there's a lot of math there. And that is the core question that we have to answer. Am I getting ahead during happy hour, or am I doing nothing and putting more butts in seats? Or is this actually costing me money? Now, before we get into the math of this, I do also want to say there's a huge argument that I would make myself that sometimes having 100 people come in and not making money, or making a much smaller percentage than I normally would, is better than having 20 people come in and make my normal percentage. Why? Because that's 80 more people in my bar. A, people like to be where people are, right? A packed bar is more attractive than an empty bar. But B, yeah, those 80 people, they might come in other times because now they have a relationship with your bar. So while I can give you the math, this is one of those places, and really this is true of almost everything we talk about, but this is definitely one of those places where the math might show you something that's true, but shouldn't be acted on. It doesn't mean don't do the math. It doesn't mean don't consider what's going on. It does mean make sure you factor in everything before you make a decision. So what is the audit we can do on a happy hour? Well, first of all, pull your POS data. Look at your transaction count. Look at your revenue by hour for happy hour versus the same hours on days that you don't have a happy hour, if that's a thing, or versus your next highest traffic comparable day part. Now, obviously, this can be hard, right? Because if you're running happy hour Monday through Friday, we don't have another weekday to benchmark against. But we can benchmark against the hours directly before and after happy hour, maybe, depending on how much food impacts your business and whether or not you're doing a big dinner crowd. But the idea here is just to get an idea of what is happy hour actually doing in my establishment. Then look at your customer composition, right? Are you getting in new faces or are these regulars? And if they are regulars, and you have the ability, and a lot of times with POS systems, we can do this by looking at credit card transaction level detail. Are these folks that came in at 6 that now come in at 5 because your happy hour runs from 4 to 6? If that's the case, they're just trying to get a discount. That's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean necessarily we should change our happy hour. But it is an interesting signal. Now, what do we want to see to say that, well, yeah, happy hour is definitely working? We want to see a cover count that is meaningfully higher than the hour before and after. And again, if your happy hour is 4 to 6, that 3 to 4 band, yeah, it's always going to be way slower, right? That 6 to 7 band, if you're doing a lot of food, could be a whole different type of crowd, a dinner crowd. But we want to say, are we seeing a lot of volume here? Because quite frankly, if we see that you had 10 people between 3 and 4, you have, 50 people per hour between 4 and 6, and from 6 to 7, you have 35 people. Maybe we're making an argument here that it's good, maybe we're not. But understanding that difference, understanding it, allows us to think about it. And that's the big thing here. The other thing we want to look at is, what is our check average during happy hour? Now, some of this is going to be based upon how you do your happy hour, right? Are you discounting everything? Are you doing 2-for-1 beers? Are you just doing some things are cheaper during happy hour, right? And if it's not everything is discounted, what's our percentage sales of discounted items versus non-discounted items? And particularly within a check or across a check. And what I mean by that is, if I have a table and they come in and they get all non-discounted items, then whether or not the happy hour was going on probably did not affect them coming in. But if I have a table where 50% of the folks had stuff on special and 50% didn't, that's not an argument against having a happy hour. Matter of fact, that's probably saying they came here because of the happy hour, but half the people did not order the special. So there's many ways to look at this, and it's quite complex in how you think through it. But unless you look at the data, unless you understand the difference in cover count and check averages and what that means for your bottom line, you can't make smart decisions. Higher volume, lower price often equals the same profit as lower volume, higher price. So keep that in mind. Now, one of the ways to do this in the math is to look at specific drinks. So let's say I have a classic cocktail list, and during happy hour, for example's sake, let's say every drink on there is $15. And during happy hour, they're $10. So it's a 33% reduction, right? So if I sell 100 drinks, I would have made $150, but now I'm going to make, or 10 drinks rather, I would have made $150, and now I'm going to make $10 or $100. Do I sell enough more drinks, right? Does my drink volume, if my price is coming down 33%, does my volume increase by 50% to cover that? Where I'm selling the same revenue I would otherwise be selling, right? If happy hour is going to bring in 30 incremental covers and they all have 2 drinks, probably winning. But you have to understand this relationship. And the big thing this comes down to, and this is a very hard thing to measure regardless of the numbers and anything else, is how many of your happy hour guests are truly incremental? How many come in just because it's happy hour? And if that's a large percentage, you're winning. If that's a small percentage, you're probably not winning. And I'll give you a slightly different real-world example of this. I have a client that was doing a special where you buy a food item, you get free games. And when I looked at the number of the food item, I said, well, you're only selling like 3 or 4 of these a week, so that's not really impacting the free games, right? It was pretty easy to say, I don't see this adding to your revenue. I see this just cannibalizing business you already have. And some of this, right, again, the math is there, but you also need to look at your gut. What is that telling you? What do you see in your business? Now, if your happy hour isn't quite working, you go, well, I'm kind of on the edge here because it's adding, it's bringing in people. It's not really helping me profit-wise. Oftentimes, that doesn't mean pull happy hour out. That means improve your happy hour. Come up with some alternate approaches so that you can drive that incremental traffic in more. Market differently. Do whatever you can to try to push more people in for happy hour. But if you have things on special and they're not really selling and it doesn't really seem to be driving business, you should probably cut it. If you have things on special for happy hour and it's driving a lot of business and a lot of people are coming in, it's probably working well for you. The hard spot is in that middle position. And that takes both math, understanding your business, and understanding your customers in order to determine the best foot forward. But the bottom line for today, anytime you're doing time-bound specials, and happy hour is the best example of that, but anytime you're doing that, you need to be looking at your incremental increase in guests, your incremental increase in revenue, what you're discounting, how many people are buying that discount, because that's going to tell you whether or not this is actually working for you and let you make smart business decisions based on data that keep your customers happy and increase your bottom line.
That about wraps it up for today. If you're tired of sorting through bar problems by yourself, come join us inside Bar Business Nation. It's our free Facebook group for bar owners and operators talking about what's working, what's not, and how to make the business easier to run. Search Bar Business Nation on Facebook, and I'll talk to you next time.